sometimes it's good to zoom out and talk about motive. Why is the U.S. doing this? And we shared a panel together, and I spoke a little bit about my opinions on that. How it's really multifaceted. I mean, this is a power that's challenging the U.S. global hegemony. It could finally introduce true multilateralism. Multilateralism. With Europe and the UK and the US together. Is not real, true multilateralism. They go in and they destroy the same countries, whether it's Libya, Iraq, or all these different places. There is no balance in this world, and China could eventually become that balance. They also are making inroads into places in the global south, where these countries are choosing to deal with China. And then obviously there is a condescending element where the media wants you to believe that these countries don't have agency of their own. They're making a big mistake. And the U.S. has to come in with this $300 million per year plan to make anti-China propaganda. They were recently exposed in Zimbabwe paying $1,000 per article, negative anti-China article. Like this is pretty crazy. And I guess the other thing too, the ironic thing for me, which I highlighted in that talk, was that the U.S. has a lot of problems right now domestically. It is incredibly divided. Like, I mean, it looks like the ingredients are there for kind of pre-Civil War type stuff with how divided the country is. And an enemy, an outside enemy has always been a great unifier. So there's so many benefits. Smashing China back down protects U.S. corporate interests abroad. And then also it deflects domestic attention away from the problems at home, often caused by those same corporations abroad. It's like a double win. I don't know if you want to, obviously I went into a little bit more detail than that in the talk, but I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about the dynamics of the motive and what's going on behind the scenes.
Oh, for sure. Well, for one, the United States, as you mentioned, is in this state of crisis, and in many ways, the society is collapsing. And this has been something that has been decades in the making. The United States' overall share of the world economy once was nearly half, if not more than half, of the entire world economy, is now shrinking to the point where China, in real GDP terms, which given the currency differences and where China was versus where the United States was just 2-3 decades ago, China is set to overtake in real GDP terms in the next 10 to 15 years, the United States. So that in and of itself, that alone has sounded off intense alarm bells in the bipartisan foreign policy establishment in the United States. This is a huge problem. And for a lot of the reasons you mentioned, China is strong and China is stable. And the United States and its allies, whether we're talking about the UK or Canada or Australia, don't really have this kind of stability right now. And so they don't really have much to offer those countries which have historically suffered under their influence or outright domination via colonialism or neocolonialism. I think this is a part of this so-called great power competition that both Donald Trump and now Joe Biden champion. They champion this kind of competition because they really do fear that, and their fears are legitimate, that China will inevitably have a strong advantage when it comes to trade, mutual relations, cooperation, dialogue, all kinds of relations with the global south. And that because China is so stable and because China is growing so quickly, that eventually this will lead to a total undermining of the US's economic sphere of influence everywhere. And this includes Europe, this includes Africa, this includes Latin America, everywhere. And I think that's why you see the United States, although it's not talked about so much in the media, the United States' major focus and major point of investment is militarily against China. That's often not talked about enough, in the sense that China is always the one framed as the aggressor by the US and Western media. But if people knew the scale, the amount, nearly more than half of all of the US's investments in its military, which its military is bigger than the next 11 countries combined, are directed at China. That's a categorical fact. And that's only growing, especially now with this new hyping up of the Taiwan Strait issue.
Right, right. Yeah, no, for sure. And it's a real pity that with this shift, that it didn't become a catalyst for introspection, for adjustment, for competing, because this is what they're always talking about, is fair competition. Well, if these countries in the global south are choosing to deal with China, offer something better. Come to the table with something better. And if you're going to continually insult China's options in Africa and say that it's debt trap diplomacy, much of which has been debunked by many people, how much worse does your options have to be that they're still choosing China? And it reminds me of a speech that somebody gave from an African, a few months before Gaddafi was murdered. And Hillary Clinton celebrated that on live TV before destroying one of Africa's richest countries that was looking at unifying Africa, that was looking at creating a resource-backed central currency that was responsible for putting Africa's first communications satellite into outer space, reducing the need to pay 500 million euros per year to use the satellite tools from outside. Completely destroying these countries. And he said he was laughing through that. And he says, you know what? And you're telling us not to deal with China. And he laughed. And he said, what can China do to us that you haven't already done to us? What, if we don't deal with China, what are you going to give us in return other than bombs and drones, and destroying our countries and assassinating our leaders? And that's a valuable question that people really need to ask. And I think that's why it's really important that some of this propaganda is really directed towards the global south to convince them that they're making the wrong choice. And it's a shame. It's like, this could have been, finally, there are two options in the market for these countries, for these global south countries. I don't necessarily want either side to win, but the prospect of both of them competing and offering something better to these countries is exciting, even if the U.S. is the one that wins out, even if this is what forced them to provide better options.